as far as pulling any conclusions from that, it was just so speculative that I didn't really have much that I wanted to say. I mean, I'm open to anybody in-house or online who would briefly care to share anything that was revealed to them or that they have been looking at. Would somebody give Mundo a microphone for me? Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Lori. Somebody, Cynthia?
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Mundo, can you go ahead and speak for me?
Yes. Can you hear me?
You guys hearing Mundo? Okay, go ahead, Mundo.
So I was saying about maybe 15, 20 years ago, I'm not sure if you know about Michael Rood, he did a study on this. And I have the video at home, and the word fire is, well, the word ish is also the same word for fire.
Right.
So when they did the translation, it's actually a fire inside of the
And this is where you get the thermonuclear war with the lead casing. Yeah, that we did talk about that. We did cover that as a possible interesting thing. In the land of Shinar, people have said, well, the land of Shinar could be talking about Iran. That is certainly, bless you, that is certainly possible. And I've gone, talking with this about this issue with other people, and it's like, the land of Shinar being associated with Persia is a little bit tenuous, but it's roughly the same area, if you want to say that. So sure, I got no problem with that. As to what it means, I don't know. I mean, does that mean that where is this thing coming from? Is it like, is this telling us that Iran has got a nuke? Well, join the party. I'm sure they got nukes that they got from North Korea. What is that? Is the scripture telling us that they have them? That they're going to use them?
Well, it lines up though with, their claim now that they want to erase Israel off the map.
Oh, sure.
So, they've been making that claim for
sure. While, so Persia would definitely love to wipe Israel off the map. As to whether this is relating to some kind of lead encased fire, in that sense, it certainly could be. As to what it's telling us, that was the big question. Is I have no idea. Is it telling us that there's going to be thermonuclear war? Well, okay, fair enough. I don't know what else to say beyond that. I kind of liked it reminded me, I kind of thought it was an interesting thing where I kind of looked at it in a more spiritual way, where it's literally talking about wickedness and putting it in an encasement and sending it away. That reminded me of the scapegoat, of the goat of Yom Kippur. Like putting the sin of the people on the head of this goat and sending it off into the wilderness. And this is literally wickedness. This woman, Ish, is described as wickedness and being placed into an ephah with a lead cover being placed over it and sent off to the land of Shinar. So two things caught my attention there that I thought were interesting. And one was perhaps it's similar to the scapegoat where like Father is taking wickedness in the sense of the iniquity of the people and sealing it up and sending it away. Okay, that's an interesting idea that I thought was fascinating. The second part of that is that it kind of works well with passages about evil being repaid onto the heads of those who actually have evil intentions. The Psalms and the Proverbs are about that a lot, where it's like David and Solomon repeat that idea so many times. Is like the one who tries to do this, it will happen to him in that same way. And so I thought, well, this is Shinar, this is Babylon, there's great wickedness. I mean, the very first time that's why I said, go back and look at Babylon, because the first time it's mentioned, we're talking about Nimrod and the Tower of Babel and, them trying to basically overthrow the rule of Elohim to establish their own rule. And this is where a lot of wickedness comes from. And if you take the wickedness from Israel, for example, and you seal it up, which is really an interesting thing when you tie it together with the Messiah, which is essentially kind of what's happening. The wickedness of the people is being placed into some kind of sealed container and sent against the place that sends out wickedness. I just liked the idea. Rather than, hey, this is a nuclear weapon being sent to Iran. Okay, what am I supposed to do with that? This idea just appealed to me a little bit more. Am I saying that Iran doesn't have a weapon? Well, sure. Why? Of course they do. What does that matter to me? I don't know. They can blow me up. They could blow up Israel. They've said that they would like to. But what's the spiritual lesson that I can take from that? Nothing, as far as I know. But is it literal? Can you interpret it literally that way and apply it in that way? Sure. I just don't know what we can learn from that. So those were my ideas. I'm just throwing it out there. Anybody care to throw in a couple of more shekels in regard to that? No? Okay. So just as a preview then, we're going to start kicking into chapter 6 of Zechariah. And just as a preview, I'll say that today we're talking about horses and chariots. We have already dealt with horses in chapter 1, where we had a man with some, 4 different color horses, and we've dealt with, colored horses before. We're going to be dealing with them again because the colored horses are back. So in this chapter, we have horses and chariots going forth, and we also have the high priest and the branch. This is a most fascinating passage, but if this evening is going to be like any other evening, I doubt very much if we'll actually get near that. So, if you have your Bible, please do open it up to Zechariah chapter 6, and we will have story time with Uncle Alan. All right, here is what it says in Zechariah chapter 6. It says, this is, by the way, he is turning or lifting up his eyes and seeing the final vision. Remember that Zechariah had 8 visions. This is the 8th and final vision of Zechariah. And he turned and lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, there came 4 chariots out from between 2 mountains. And the mountains were mountains of brass. In the first chariot were red horses, and in the second chariot black horses, and in the third chariot white horses, and in the fourth chariot spotted and bay horses, pale red. Then I answered and said to the angel that talked with me, "What are these, sir?" And the angel answered and said to me, "These are the 4 spirits of the heavens, which go forth from standing before the master of all the earth. The black horses which are therein go forth into the north country, and the white go forth after them, and the spotted go forth toward the south country. And the bay went forth and sought to go, that they might walk to and fro through the earth. And he said, Get you hence, walk to and fro through the earth. So they walked to and fro through the earth. Then he cried and spoke to me, saying, Behold, these that go toward the north country have quieted my spirit in the north country. And the word of Yah came to me, saying, Take of them of the captivity, even to Heldai and Tobiah and Yediah, which are come from Babylon, and go the same day, and go into the house of Josiah the son of Zephaniah. Then take silver and gold and make crowns, and set them on the head of Yeshua, or Joshua, the son of Josedek, the high priest, and speak to him, saying, Thus says Yah of hosts, saying, Behold, the man whose name is the branch, and he shall grow up out of his place, and he shall build the temple of Yah. Even he shall build the temple of Yah, and he shall bear the glory, and shall sit and rule on his throne, and he shall be a priest on his throne, and the counsel of peace shall be between them both. And the crowns shall be to Chelem, and to Tobiah, and to Yediah, and to Chen, the son of Zephaniah, for a memorial in the temple of Yah. And they that are far off shall come and build in the temple of Yah. And you shall know that Yah of hosts has sent me to you. And this shall come to pass if you will diligently obey the voice of Yah, your Elohim. Well, that is fascinating. There's a lot of very interesting things there. Now, one of the first things I want to bring to your attention is that remember that in our last discussion, emphasis was placed on judgment. I think that the scroll going forth and clearing out anybody who was a liar and a false swearer definitely speaks of judgment. The wickedness being contained and sent somewhere else also kind of speaks of judgment. And I think that we are in similar territory here with judgment, at least until we cross over into the vision of the branch and this priest king with crowns on his head. So I do believe, and we'll kind of flush this out as we talk about it, that these chariots going forth are in the same type of vein. Make sense? So, in a sense that these these horses and chariots of different colors going forth into the north country and the south country, that this is probably if we interpret this in a certain way, which we'll discuss in a moment, it might be a source of strength for the Israelites, because we've dealt with that a lot in this whole book, that there's a lot of encouragement for the Israelites, but also a pronouncement of judgment against her enemies. And I think we're in a similar vein here. So in order to gain a better insight into this chapter, I'm going to suggest that we begin to dig a little bit deeper on some of these key words when we're looking at this thing with the horses and chariots. So just from your experience of studying among this group, those of you who might have been here for a little while, what key phrases or words or whatever might you think that we would want to look at as we're reading through that chapter? What stuck out at you where it's like, oh yeah, here's a little flag planted where we need to dig a little deeper? Anybody? What would you want to look at? What's that?
Maybe the two mountains.
Yeah, the two mountains. That's definitely a good one. Anybody else?
I was looking at meanings of names.
Yes, some name meanings would also be a good one. Jerry?
Going to and fro throughout the earth, like in the book of Job, and directed to Satan very few things.
Yeah.
For Christians to hear all that.
Yeah, absolutely. So you got the idea of things going to and fro. That's kind of reminds you of Satan going to and fro in the book of Job. That's an interesting conundrum. The horses, yeah. The color of the horses, absolutely. Anything else?
Yeshua.
What's that?
Yeshua.
Yeah, absolutely. Angela? Directions, yeah. Some going north, some going south, some wandering all over the place. Another question, what the heck happened to the red horses? They just disappeared. We told that there's some red horses, we don't know where they went. Tracy?
I was just, when I studied this before, I was seeing a connection with these four spirits that they're talking about.
Yes.
Here, with the four horsemen in Revelation and the four evil judgments in Ezekiel 14:21.
Yes, absolutely. Good insights. Anyone else notice anything that just kind of stuck out at you as a possible place to dig? Okay. Those are all very key insights, and you're absolutely right. So let's get out our shovels and let's do a little bit of digging. So number one, I think somebody mentioned the mountains of brass, and I think that the first part of this vision, you have to kind of tear apart the mountains of brass, the chariots, and the horses. I think those are your key elements to start out this chapter. So what we're going to do is we're going to dig through a couple of those things. Now, between mountains of brass is the source of where these chariots came from. It says that they come out from between these two. What's that? Oh, I thought somebody said something. These chariots and horse teams come out from between these two mountains of brass. So, what do you think of when you think of mountains? Do mountains symbolize something for you?
Kingdom.
What?
Kingdom.
Kingdom. Okay. Anything else that mountains make you think of something else, Tracy?
Shoulders.
Shoulders, like Mount Gerizim and Ebal?
Ebal.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's a good one. Somebody else? Who is Majesty. Okay, excellent. So Ella, what's up, Ella?
I was just thinking of a few Bible verses. I know there's some out there that say stuff like, and they will cry, wish that the mountains would fall on them.
Yeah, absolutely. Good insight. Gabriella, or Luke, is that your name?
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm horrible with names. I'll remember in a couple of months. Go ahead. Go ahead.
So I was just, it brought to my mind the two mountains. There was one, this mountain I have blessing, and on that mountain I have cursing.
Yes. That's exactly what Tracy was talking about a second ago with Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim. What is that, Hebron? Is that between I think those are the mountains at Hebron. Excellent insights, you guys. So I think...
Also...
Yeah, go ahead, Luke.
Interrupt you. Something I noticed in verse 8, it says, "See those who go toward the land of the north have given rest to my spirit in the land of the north," and there was judgment when they got sent to the land of the north.
Right.
So,
Yes, good insight. Excellent insights. So, I think you're all very much right when you're talking about these different ideas that mountains kind of bring to your mind and as kind of a symbolic meaning. And I also think that it's not a bad idea to actually look at some mountains in the Bible. In fact, it occurred to me to just kind of look at, well, where's the first part where we see, where do we see mountains, specific mountains? Hayden?
Noah's Ark?
Yes, Hayden mentions Noah's Ark. Mount Ararat is the first mountain mentioned in the Bible specifically by name. And that is I'm just going to give you the reference because I've mentioned to you before, I could put up the scriptures, but you guys know the scriptures, okay? So in Genesis 8 and 4, if you want to make a note to yourself, you can, is where we get the first mention of a mountain specifically. And that is Mount Ararat. Now, when you think about Mount Ararat and what happened there with Noah, what does that mountain symbolize to you, Hayden?
The only place of safety in a sea of chaos.
Yes, a place of safety in a sea of chaos. Well, that's very cleverly worded, my son. That is a delightful choice of words. Yeah, that's absolutely true. Mount Ararat is absolutely a place of safety and refuge from raging waters. Raging waters, what does that represent to you? If you've studied prophecy at all, you know what raging waters are. What are raging waters? Those are nations, peoples, tongues, angry, vengeful, raging peoples, like civil unrest perhaps, something like that. And this Mount Ararat is a high place of safety and refuge from raging waters. Interesting concept, okay? The rainbow is seen there, which is a promise of deliverance, and sacrifices are offered, okay, by Noah and his sons and his family after the flood, after a great deliverance. Fascinating ideas. So there's your first mention of a specific mountain in the Bible. What about the second mountain? Not specific, but it's pretty specific. Not given a name, but there's a story around this mountain. Does anybody think what it is?
Was Isaac sacrificed on a mountain?
Yes, but that's not the next one. He said, was Isaac sacrificed on a mountain? Almost, yes, but that's not the next one. Are there any other ideas? This is specifically the mountain where Lot fled to as he was escaping Sodom and Gomorrah. The mountain is not identified specifically by name, but it's apparently outside the town of Zoar, right? So again, you have an idea, and that's in Genesis 19:17. You have Lot being provided safety here and his daughters. Okay, another interesting idea. The third reference to a specific mountain in the Bible is Mount Moriah, and that is the one that Hayden was pointing out a moment ago, which is in Genesis 22:2, where you have Isaac, the Akedah, Isaac being offered on the altar there at Mount Moriah. Provision by Father is offered there as a sacrificial offering to save the beloved son. It's an interesting thing that happened there. Now, the next mountain specifically that is mentioned, anybody? Hayden?
Sinai?
That is Mount Sinai or Mount Horeb. That is in Exodus 3 and 12. Very interesting things happening there with the area of refuge for Moses. You know, we're taking the people to this mountain where they're not only going to worship Father, they're going to get some commandments from Father. That's where Father first made his connection with Moshe at the burning bush. On the backside of Horeb was he was, tending the flocks of Jethro, his father-in-law. So I've just chosen these 4 as interesting representative examples of some of the first mountains mentioned in the Bible. If you want to speak, someone.
There's a lot of parallels between Noah's story and Sinai.
There are a lot of parallels. Yes, you can just keep it on the table, Steve. That's fine. There are a lot of parallels between Noah's story and what? Sinai. Okay, yeah, that's a good point. Very good point. So, looking at those 4 examples of mountains in the Bible, just hold those in your grasp for a couple minutes and let's look at a couple of other elements, and then we'll kind of see if we can tie these things together. The next thing that we're looking at is the idea that these mountains are bronze. Now, when you think about bronze, what do you think of? Hayden, what's up? Somebody, you may as well just go ahead and take that microphone since you're going to be talking all night. What's up?
I have a lot to say.
He's got a lot to say. Did you take a look at my notes? I think he stole my notes and he's looking at them. All right, go ahead.
Whenever I see parts of the environment being made out of metal, it's usually very, very bad.
Okay, in what sense?
Memory. I'm just thinking land of bronze, sky of iron, something like that.
Yes, so if you disobey Yah, your sky will not rain. It'll be like iron, and your ground will be like bronze because it won't grow anything.
Yeah.
Or it's flipped. I don't remember whether it's iron. Yeah, they're both metal. One's iron, one's bronze. I don't remember which is which. That's a good insight. Hold on to that. Kevin or Gabrielle, Luke, sorry. Man, I'm remembering your name tonight for some reason. That's pretty impressive of me.
He's a biblical book, so it's easy to remember. The first thing of bronze that came to my mind was the waist of the statue and the prophecy of Nebuchadnezzar.
Yeah.
Yes, good insight. So that is the waist of bronze, which is representative of what?
Greece.
Greece. Okay, excellent. So that's a representation of Greece and the statue of Nebuchadnezzar. Anybody else have any other associations that come with bronze? How about in regards to the tabernacle? Tracy, sorry, go ahead. I didn't see your hand raised. Go ahead, Tracy.
That's what I was going to say. The first mention is Cain's descendant, Tubal-Cain,
Right.
becoming like an artificer, or how do you say that word, of brass.
Yep.
But then after that, like you were just about to say, like a ton of stuff in the tabernacle is
Right.
brass.
Right, absolutely.
And then this pole that
The
Moses
serpent.
made,
Yeah.
the serpent pole, that was brass.
Yep, absolutely. Now, I think there's a lot of disparate elements regarding brass. But what we want to try to do, if we can, is we looked at these 4 different mountains and lots of different ideas about mountains. And now we've listened to several people throwing out ideas about what brass might represent. Do you see anything that you could tie these things together in some way? Is there similarities or differences? Durability, longevity. Now that's about brass in particular, but I'm saying like in regard to judgment, no sky, no rain, no growth, bronze serpent, these artificers like Tracy was talking about. What do you think Tubal-Cain's people were making?
So following Tracy's line of thinking, you had Mount Karam or Hermon in English,
Yeah.
where the Watchers made the agreement. They slept with the daughters of men, and we had the giants. They gave them all the hidden knowledge.
Now you're going to the Book of Enoch for that information, correct? Okay, so Brett is bringing up the Book of Enoch where it's talking about the Mount Hermon.
Yeshua's transfiguration was there, and then he went down and said, "You guys, he preached to them saying, I overcame.
Yes, understood.
Stand by in Tartarus.
Okay.
Judgment's coming."
Yeah, good, interesting insight. So David.
I was, when you said brass, my mind was going to Sinai and the brass calf or whatever, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, that was a gold calf.
Oh, I'm sorry, gosh.
Come on, David. Are you sleeping out there, buddy? You know better than that.
Same word as serpent.
Well, what got me confused was I was thinking about where Moses encountered the burning bush, which is not Sinai, but I think it's somewhere close, isn't it?
I think it was on the backside of Horeb, it's actually called at that time, but it's actually the same mountain as far as I understand.
Yeah, Sinai Peninsula is a big place.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely. So, no, that's a good, thank you, David. What occurs to me as you consider all of these, especially when you consider the Levitical stuff in the tabernacle, where you've got, who is it? Oh, sorry, David. Are you having a heart attack over there? What was that noise?
Yeah, I was just still thinking about brass versus gold.
I heard you go, ah! I wonder if David's okay. I better ask him. Sorry. Luke or Gabriella, whoever.
So I know, like Tracy said, there's a whole bunch of stuff in the tabernacle that was made with brass, and the one that came to my mind was the wash basin where the priests wash their hands.
Yeah. Right. Yes, that was exactly what I was just about to say. Is the ones that I'm specifically remembering is that in the enclosure around the tabernacle, I believe that there are like bronze pegs or socket holders or something that are holding up these boards or something like that. But I know that we also have a bronze altar. This is where the main sacrifices are happening out in the courtyard, and we also have the laver, the washing area. So common ideas regarding bronze are, I think the two most common that I could find were purity and judgment. But there's also ideas of strength and stuff like that. But I think purity and judgment were kind of interesting. And I see that you probably recognize that, yeah, okay, that you're talking sky of iron or ground of iron, I don't remember which. But then you've also got the laver, which is a washing place for the Levitical priests before they enter the holy place to do their work. And those two ideas seem to kind of go together for me, that judgment and purification kind of go hand in hand. I mean, why does Father issue judgment? Did you want to answer that question or make a different observation?
I was going to make an observation about bronze.
Oh, okay. Hold on to that. I will hold on to that question. Hayden has the microphone. He's reaching it towards you now. Go ahead, Evan.
Bronze, if it were to symbolize purity, it would be a purification, I would believe, and not purity itself.
Yeah.
Because bronze is not one metal. It's two combined
it's an amalgamation,
together.
yes.
So it wouldn't make sense for it to be purity just by its composition.
You know what's curious? I'm glad you brought that up, because I believe that Father in his infinite wisdom chose bronze to be in Solomon's laver. I don't know if you're aware of this, but bronze actually has antimicrobial properties. That it is because of its chemical composure, or the way it's forged, or something like that. You can look it up. It's quite known to artificers, as it were, or people who forge metal, that it actually has antimicrobial and antibacterial properties, which makes sense since God said we're going to create this laver for the priest to wash. It'll be impervious to stuff seeping into the metal.
Yeah, copper sinks.
Copper sinks and stuff like that. Absolutely. So, and as a matter of fact, the Bible doesn't actually have three separate words for copper, bronze, and brass. They're all the same word. All those are different mixtures of tin and copper. And interestingly enough, that most of the tin, this is totally just throwing this out there as a little trivia thing. Where did most of the tin in the known world come from in the ancient world? England. Cornwall, England. Isn't that interesting? That is the most common place where people got tin in the ancient world, in England. Fascinating stuff. In any event, I apologize for digressing, but judgment and purification, I was saying that these two things go hand in hand often, because why does Father pronounce judgment? Well, it's often a punishment, obviously, but what does God punish just for the sake of punishing? No, it's correction. It's correction in a sense for purity. Punishment and correction is supposed to be purifying. So in a sense, bronze does indeed seem to me to have a really strong association with judgment and purification, and those two things are linked. So now if we put all these things together regarding judgment, purification, which is bronze, and we got these mountains, people have said that these mountains symbolize like two places on the earth or something. I'm like, well, I don't know that. It seems weird to me because the text itself tells us that these 4 chariot teams came from between these mountains where they stood before the Lord of all the earth. So the source is God himself. God himself seems to be between these 2 mountains. So what do these 2 mountains symbolize? That's a key question. What are your thoughts? Just tying together some of the things that we've talked about with different mountains in the Bible and what they might symbolize, what bronze might symbolize, the fact that these chariots came from there where they are standing before the Lord of all the earth. What is your thought regarding what these 2 mountains of bronze might symbolize? And that would be pure speculation. I acknowledge that this is pure speculation, but, you know, it's an informed speculation. We have done it. We have informed ourselves as best we can. But does anybody have any ideas? I wouldn't, frankly, hazard a guess myself. I don't know. Some people have said, well, one of the mountains represents the law of Moses and the other mountain represents the gospel of Yeshua. Okay, fair enough. I don't know how you would make that connection, but it's an interesting idea. What?
That's Hebrews. You've drawn near to the mountain.
Oh, okay, yeah. Oh, yeah. So they must, yeah, I see what you're saying. They're drawing from the book of Hebrews where, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Luke.
It just came to my mind. They could represent judgment, given that the chariots was the white horse, speckled horse, and the black horse.
Right.
Could be like famine and pestilence and
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Good point. So, anyone else?
You
Somebody.
got the 2 mountains you can choose from. Yah's mountain, who's your daddy? Or is your daddy the adversary? So you got Mount Hermon, or you got Mount Zion. Okay.
Well, you know, it's an interesting point that you made about, who's your daddy, in a sense, using a colloquialism, which I enjoyed. But, you know, thinking about Mount Ebal and Gerizim, as Tracy and Gabriella mentioned a moment ago, that those are contronyms. They are opposites to one another. That one is a mount of blessing and one is a mount of cursing. And that the Torah brings forth both. And that would kind of make sense to me from that perspective of the word of Yah. In fact, you might say that these 2 mountains of strength, protection, judgment, it's almost like the mountains will bring forth strength and protection and help, which is blessing, or it will bring forth judgment and purification, which is cursing, in a sense, because that's blessings and curses. That is Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim. So it's a good connection. It could totally make a lot of sense for those things to represent those 2 mountains. So in any event, these 4 chariot and horse teams proceed from Yah himself. It seems pretty clear to me that that's where these things are coming from. Now, what we want to do, is everyone satisfied with that? I'm not totally satisfied with that. I think it's an interesting idea. It makes a little bit of sense to me. Does anyone have any other comments regarding mountains of bronze as the source of where these horses came from? Okay, so then we'll move on to the horses and the chariots. See if we can do a little bit of discovery about that, and then hopefully we'll be able to kind of tie it together and say, well, what is being discussed here? I doubt it, but we'll see what happens. The Father knows, and maybe he will enlighten us. Maybe he will show us. So these horses and chariots, they do come from between these bronze mountains. They go forth from standing before the Lord of all the earth. We have heard that expression before. It was just like a chapter or two ago. So thus they are coming forth from Yah himself, or the Messiah, take your pick. Now, what about chariots? What might they represent to you? Do you have any ideas regarding chariots? What? War. Yeah, they're most, in fact, what's the Hebrew word for chariot? Merkava, Merkavot is what it's saying here, which is frankly the Israeli tank is a Merkavot tank. This is their chariot. So yeah, it's a war implement essentially. Now something interesting to me, and I'll just throw this out there for your consideration, is I always like to go back to the first mention of important words in our study. What do you think is the first mention of the word chariot in the Bible, in the Torah?
Kind of have to do with the riding on the clouds, probably.
Who?
Doesn't it talk about God that the clouds are his chariot or something like that?
Oh, like in like Ezekiel or something? Okay, yeah, okay. In Psalms, who was raising their hand? Did they back out? They chickened out? Oh, it's Ella Tim. Tell us what's up, Ella.
Was it the fiery chariot?
Oh, that snatched up Elijah. That is not the first mention of chariot, but a great one, though. I like that. Uh-oh. Here's Evan. What's up? Who got a microphone? What's up, Evan?
Is it Pharaoh's chariots?
It is Pharaoh's chariot. But what's fascinating is that chariot is related to who? What's the story about that? Who chariot? It's Pharaoh's chariot, but what's the story there? Do you know?
Moses.
Is it them being drowned in the sea? Because I don't know exactly.
It is not. That is actually the third reference to a chariot in the Bible, is the horses and the riders drowned in the sea. The first reference to a chariot, anybody know?
Yes, Moses.
Moses?
Wasn't Moses riding on the chariot directly behind Pharaoh?
No. But it's Joseph. I knew you were getting the name confused. Yes, it is Joseph riding in Pharaoh's second chariot. And the pronunciation was saying, bow the knee. Now, what's that make you think of? Haman. Oh, yes, and from the book of Esther. Yes, you are correct. That's a good insight. As far as Joseph being a representation of what? Jesus, like Yeshua. You know, he is granted second authority in the kingdom just under Pharaoh. And he is, as a symbol of his authority, he is to ride in the second chariot behind Pharaoh as the heralders say, bow the knee. So this is when Joseph is given control of the whole kingdom of Egypt. Just like Daniel. So, and just like Yeshua, a prophetic shadow picture of Yeshua being granted complete control over the kingdom. And he is given complete control except for the throne of the Father, in a sense, which is what, Pharaoh says. You'll have complete control. Only in respect to the throne will I be higher than you. So, this is the first mention of chariot in the Bible, is Joseph riding in Pharaoh's second chariot. Now, interestingly enough, the second mention is also Joseph, hitching up his chariot and going out to meet his father Jacob when he's coming to the land of Egypt. Now, this is instructive and very interesting. How it relates exactly to the book of Zechariah, we'll have to explore that. But then one of the third ones, or the third one, is the chariots are destroyed at the bottom of the Red Sea. So they're all related to Egypt. All the first three references and several other references the first handful of references are all in relation to Egypt. Now you have other ones like, Haman. You've got prophet Eliyahu being taken to a chariot in heaven. or being taken by chariot into heaven. So yeah, you get some interesting ideas, but just hold on to that idea regarding the first ideas about chariots being associated with Joseph and Egypt, which I think is seriously instructive for us. But now, just hold on to that for a moment, and let's go to horses. What do you think about when you think about horses? Where are some of the first mentions of horses in the Bible? Bless you.
Kings increase.
Kings are not to increase horses. Why is that, Brett?
There's a strength because they were implements of war and violence and power.
Again, we have implements of war and violence and power. Why did Father not want them accruing horses to themselves, do you think?
Because they might become, in their own eyes, powerful rather than relying
Yes,
on-
they would begin to trust in the horses rather than their Father in heaven. They would think, well, we're awesome. We got chariots and horses now. Some trust in chariots, some trust in horses. Yes, you are correct. So, interesting that we have chariots and horses both being associated with war. Okay, so we now have mountains of bronze, judgment and purification, horses and chariots coming out from there, which are associated with war and military power. Yep. Now, we need to kind of put these combos together, the horses and the chariots. Now, the angel actually tells us that these are identified as the four spirits of the heavens. Now, that's interesting. What?
Could it mean winds?
Could it mean wind? Absolutely, it could mean wind because it's the word ruach. So that could literally be translated as the four winds of heaven, not the four spirits of heaven. You're talking about compass cardinal points. Yep, that is often associated with the four winds of heaven. But you can absolutely look at that. So the spirits here is actually the Hebrew word ruchot, which is just derived from ruach, which is Hebrew 7307, which is indeed translated as wind or spirit. Now, it's so you could actually translate it the four winds of heaven. Now, does that bring anything to your mind?
Revelation 7.
Revelation chapter 7. That's an interesting connection. And interestingly enough, in Revelation chapter 7, we also have reference to these horses. So there's two connections there.
And there's also judgment when Jehovah said, I'm going to scatter you to the four winds of the earth.
Yes, Yah says, I will scatter you to the four winds of the earth. That's a very common phrase in the Bible. Tracy Tim.
So, going back to the chariot thing, this reminded me of a scripture in Isaiah 31. It's kind of like a parable, but he gives the interpretation. He says, woe to those who go down to Egypt for help and rely on horses and trust in chariots, because there are many.
Yep.
And then he tells you the Egyptians are man and not God, and their horses are flesh and not spirit.
Right.
So it associates Egyptians with men who are riding in these chariots and being led by the flesh.
Interesting.
And now here we see these are spiritual chariots.
Yeah.
So their horses are flesh and not spirits. So then we can maybe look at this and go, it's a chariot of God being led. Those horses are spiritual.
Right.
And then again, we talked about judgment. I think there is some kind of judgment going on because if we do connect the four evil judgments of Ezekiel, what chapter is this? 14.
Okay.
Ezekiel 14. He says, I will send my four evil judgments, sword, famine, evil beast, plague on Jerusalem, and cut off from it man and beast. And we can make that connection to the four horsemen in Revelation.
Yep.
So I think it's all connected there somehow.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. That's a beautiful, beautiful insight. And I think it makes good sense for us to actually turn over to the book of Revelation chapter 7 for just a moment. I actually happen to have that on my slide for you, so I will pull that up for you. If you want to, you can open up your Bible to Revelation chapter 7. Right at the very beginning of Revelation chapter 7, we'll kind of look at this a little bit. It says, "And after this, I saw 4 messengers standing at the 4 corners of the earth." There's your compass points, perhaps. "Holding the 4 winds of the earth, that the wind should not blow on the earth, nor on the sea, nor on any tree. And I saw another messenger coming up from the rising of the sun, holding the seal of the living Elohim. And he cried with a loud voice to the 4 messengers to whom it was given to harm the earth and the sea, saying, 'Do not harm the earth, nor the sea, nor the trees, until we have sealed the servants of our Elohim upon their foreheads.'" So here we're looking at a brief interlude between the seals, which the seals are sending forth these 4 horsemen of the apocalypse with these different colored horses. And we have a pause in the action as it's saying that these 4 winds of the earth are about to go out. But this is these 4 angels, these 4 messengers are holding back the 4 winds of the earth. So the 4 winds of the earth here are related with judgment, it seems, as well. Something is about to break loose from the 4 corners of the earth, and these angels are holding it back until the servants of Elohim can be marked, set apart. He gathers people from the 4 winds and marks them, and then all hell breaks loose, so to speak. So that's an interesting connection with Zechariah. Okay, so I think there's one other place that we should take a look at, and that is Daniel chapter 7, because this same phrase, the 4 winds of heaven, are also mentioned again. So take a look at Daniel chapter 7, and that's right at the beginning in verse 2. Daniel 7:2 says that Daniel spoke and said, "I was looking in my vision by night and saw the 4 winds of the heavens stirring up the great sea, and 4 great beasts came up from the sea, different from one another." These are the leopards and the hairy goat and the iron beast. You know, we're seeing these beast systems coming up out of the great sea. Remember what the great sea, kind of the great sea of peoples, okay? These beast kingdoms are being brought up out of the sea, and the 4 winds of heaven are what are stirring up the peoples. So it seems to me that in this passage we're seeing spiritual forces that are agitating the sea, from whence come these 4 great beasts. In Revelation, we see great judgment about to break loose, where 4 spirits are holding back perhaps these spiritual forces which are about to unleash some other kind of judgment. Now, thinking about these things and kind of trying to connect them, this is where it gets hard. We've seen some interesting things regarding mountains and bronze and horses and chariots and connections with Revelation and its horses. And we've already connected the horses before when we looked at chapter 1 of Zechariah. But what is this making you think of? These chariots going forth to the north country. Like I said before, there's 4 teams of horses mentioned. Red, which disappear from the scene. We're not told anything about these red horses. We don't know where they go. But the black ones go toward the north. The white ones follow after them to the north. Okay, it's an interesting thing. The dappled and bay, or reddish horses, go toward the south, but then they seem to request permission to roam to and fro. And permission is granted. Roam to and fro.
I'm thinking that this has a lot to do with clouds.
Clouds?
Yes.
You're thinking this has to do with clouds.
Chariots. Yes. Because
How so? Give her a microphone.
Think about how mountains and clouds are always like hanging together.
Thank you.
And,
Reach out for that.
okay, so
Cindy, grab that. Go ahead.
Okay, so I just pulled up this article here, and it's pretty incredible because it starts involving things like, it says in part 1, God possesses his own cloud, he enwraps himself in it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's more than supernatural. It's positively spectacular, discharging not only rain but fire, not only hail but smoke. I mean, when you think of all these things, and you think of what he's wrapping himself in, and you think about the storms and the colors of the sky when all this is going on, and the
Sure.
directions that clouds go and how quickly they move.
Sure.
I'm thinking, yeah, it's pretty crazy when you think about how much it could be talking about clouds.
Okay.
You know,
Interesting.
there's just a lot
Yeah.
going on there. Yeah.
Interesting insights. Cadence, do you have something to share?
No, just asking.
I'm messing with you. Whenever I see somebody whispering over there, I'm like, "You got something you want to share with the whole class?" I'm messing. I'm messing. I'm messing with you. No, so that's a good insight, Cindy.
Portable
Sorry.
throne. It's a type of a portable throne.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Steve, you can take that and set it over if you like, if you wouldn't mind. Thank you. The ideas coming together here, people have suggested, and this, if you look at any, I'm going to ask Mike to talk. Mike, go ahead, buddy.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know.
No, I'm delighted that you rescued me from what I was about to say.
No, I think it's probably pretty important too to go back and parallel this to chapter 1, because it's not just the horses, it's the to and fro, and there's also talk here in Zechariah 6:8 that talks about they're going north so that they cry out that his spirit will rest upon this country. And rest is nuach. It's like Noah's name, you know. It gives a measure of peace, right? That's what that word brings about. And in Zechariah 1, that when we talked about who's standing between the myrtle trees and these horses coming out, and then wandering to and fro, and that all the earth sits still and is at peace, right? So there's a parallel between chapter 6 and chapter 1 that's kind of chiastic in that structure.
And do you know what that chiasm is?
Other than all of these visions kind of have a corresponding chiastic structure throughout the whole book of Zechariah. I couldn't tell you exactly what it means, other than I think we should be gleaning some insight from the study we did in chapter 1 and who was between those myrtle trees and what the purpose of those horses wandering to and fro were doing and what they're doing here.
Yeah, and I think you're right, and I was just, and that ties exactly in as a beautiful segue into what I was just about to say, which is most interpreters look at these horses going forth, and I think that if I remember correctly from chapter 1, these are, because you're right, we were talking about in chapter 1 how the whole earth is at rest, and it seemed like that was not a good thing back in chapter 1, that somehow that was like they were at ease and they were living languishly, you know what I'm saying? They were not languishing, that's not that, luxuriating perhaps, that they were enjoying great peace, but his own people were in turmoil and were experiencing judgment, and he was not happy about that. And that judgment was going forth from these horses to rile them up, pronounce judgment on them. And so I think that most people are, in Bible interpreters, going all the way back to the earliest Bible interpreters, and even the Midrash in the Hebrew tradition, is making a connection to these horsemen going forth and pronouncing judgment. Now, they would suggest, for example, that the reason that 2 of these horse teams are going northward is because these are judgments that are pronounced on Babylon and on Persia. That's why 2 of the horse sets go north, because Babylon and Persia are north. So that those 2 kingdoms were destroyed. Frankly, interestingly, with the Greeks coming in and destroying Persia, that put Father's spirit at rest. That it gave him a sense of tranquility and peace, in a sense that his spirit was quieted because it was riled up because these people had mistreated his people. Now, which has always puzzled me, it's kind of an interesting thing that Father says, I'm going to bring these people against you for judgment, and then all of a sudden he's mad at the people for pronouncing judgment. But it's almost like he says to Edom one time in one of the prophets, it's like, you rejoiced at the downfall of someone else. And that's different. You know, it's one thing to do judgment. It's like when you got a spanking and your little sister was laughing and she got one too. You know what I'm saying? It's like, that's just what happens. And it's almost like these Babylonians, I don't know whether they had any cognizance of actually being an instrument in the hand of Father, probably not, but he was using them for judgment against his own people and for purification. Remember, judgment and purification, which is actually what happened. But then they need to be punished because they took it too far. They rejoiced in his punishment of his own people. They took advantage. They became evil in judgment instead of just acting righteously. And so that his spirit was quieted perhaps by these black team of horses which went forth and defeated the Babylonians. And then the Persians, they did actually have a good time there, frankly. They had great favor by the Persians. You know, and even you look at the story of Esther, which comes right into this discussion earlier, which is they seem to have done pretty well with the Persian Empire. Yes, they did have a period of persecution at the hands of Haman, the Agagite, who wanted to kill them all, but that backfired. And judgment came upon the head of the one who was acting unrighteously. So the white horses going toward the north following the black ones, does that denote the fall of the Persian Empire, perhaps by the Greeks and Alexander the Great? Perhaps it does. And that quiets his spirit. But then you got these speckled, spotted, reddish-colored horses heading toward the south, and some people interpret that as the Seleucid Greek Empire of the Ptolemy Egypt, the Ptolemaic Greek Seleucid Empire. But then somehow these horses, the chariots say, hey, let's go rolling around back and to and forth across the earth. Somehow they're connecting that with Rome. I don't know. This is highly speculative, but I think you can see that they are make a connection. They do make a connection between chapter 1 of Zechariah and chapter 6 of Zechariah, as these horses going forth and pronouncing judgment, doing judgment, purification against other nations of the earth that have mistreated his treasured possession, himself, his own possession. So those are possibilities. Fascinating stuff to me. Luke.
Yeah, when I was reading it, and I very well could be incorrect on this, but the first thing that came to my mind when he was talking about his spirit having rest, said, see those who go toward the land of the north have given rest to my spirit in the land of the north. I was kind of thinking that you would have rest because the people would repent and turn back from their sins. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I'm incorrect in that. But.
No, I mean, it definitely, that language evokes that. I'm just looking at the historical context. If you do want to connect that with Babylon or whatever, I don't know how that would work exactly, because it seems to me that the Babylonians did not repent. Nineveh did. The Assyrians, yeah.
The Israelites that went to Babylon.
Yes. So them undergoing judgment in the land of the north did humble them and bring them some humility. Yeah, that's a good insight. And some persecution that happened in the land of Persia also caused a bunch of Israelites to probably purify themselves and repent. So that's a good insight. I like that. Yeah. And if you want to say that these speckled bay horses that head towards the south are somehow representative of the Seleucid Empire and the Greeks and the Ptolemaic region, then maybe those persecutions under Antiochus Epiphanes with the Maccabees and everything also introduced some purification and some repentance on the behalf of the people. It's very nicely tied together, and it's also all very nicely tied together with the temple, because the Babylonians destroyed that temple. The Persians let the Jews go back to the kingdom and rebuild it, and Antiochus defiles it. The Maccabees rebuild it and rededicate it. So it's some interesting tie-ins, some interesting things are all tying together here. So it's fascinating stuff. Yeah, it's very, very interesting stuff. So I think that right there is enough to chew on for the next, couple of weeks, probably. If you want to think about it, connect it back to chapter 1, connect it to Ezekiel, connect it to Revelation 7 and Daniel chapter 7. Lots of interesting stuff happening here. I think we've introduced you to some interesting concepts that you can begin to explore a little bit further. And I think that's a good place for us to make a break there and then go on next time we get together and study this to the second part of chapter 6 where it talks about the branch. Because that's a whole kind of separate discussion, I think.